The knock came so soft, I almost thought I imagined it. I was sitting in my living room with the lamp on low, my hands folded over the half-finished blanket in my lap, and the whole house felt too still. Even the old clock on the wall seemed louder than usual. Tick, tick, tick. I remember staring at the front door without moving, waiting for the second knock, hoping it would come and fearing it at the same time. It did. 3 weak taps. I set the blanket aside and pushed myself up from the couch slowly, the way I always did these days, one hand on the armrest, one on my hip. My knees had not been friendly to me since winter, but that night I hardly felt them. Something about that silence on the other side of the door felt wrong, heavy, like sorrow standing upright. When I opened it, I did not speak. I just stared. Marlene stood on my porch barefoot, her hair stuck to her wet cheeks, one arm wrapped around her stomach like she was trying to hold herself together. My daughter-in-law had always carried herself like a woman who wanted the whole room to notice her. Even on a grocery run, she wore lipstick and a proud smile. But that night, she looked like someone had pulled the soul right out of her. Her mouth opened, but no sound came at first. Then she whispered, so low I had to lean in. It was my sister-in-law. For a second, I honestly thought I heard her wrong. My hand tightened on the doorknob. "Marlene, what are you saying?" Her eyes lifted to mine, glassy and full. "Please let me in, Evelyn." I stepped aside without another word. She stumbled more than walked into my living room. I shut the door behind her and turned to see her gripping the back of my chair like she needed permission to remain standing. She looked at the family pictures on the wall, at my late husband Thomas smiling in his army uniform, at my 2 boys as children, all knees and scraped elbows, and then at me again. I had known Marlene for 8 years. 8 years since my older son, Daniel, brought her to Sunday dinner and acted like he had found the moon. She was bright, funny, quick with a comeback. She had charm when she wanted it and a kind of softness when she forgot to perform. But I had also learned she could hide things. Little things at first. A bill, a lie about where she had been, a sharp word disguised as a joke. Still, she was family. Or at least, I had believed she was. "Sit down," I told her. She sat. I remained standing. The room stayed quiet so long that I could hear the hum of my refrigerator from the kitchen. Marlene kept rubbing her thumb against the side of her finger over and over, like she was trying to erase something from her skin. Finally, I said, "Start from the beginning." She shook her head once. "If I start from the beginning, I may lose my nerve." "That is not my problem tonight." She closed her eyes, breathed in hard, then looked at me. "Claire told me she was going to take everything from me." That name hit me like cold water. Claire. My younger son, Michael's wife. My other daughter-in-law. My stomach turned. Why would Claire say something like that? Marlene laughed then, but it was broken and ugly. Because she could, because I let her know too much, because I trusted her. I sat across from her, careful and straight-backed. "You need to make sense." She nodded fast, tears gathering again. I know, I never thought I'd be the woman showing up at your door like this." "No woman ever does." She looked down at her hands. "She said my baby didn't belong to Daniel." The room went dead. I did not gasp. I did not ask what she meant. At 68 years old, I had learned that when truth enters a room, the worst thing you can do is scare it back out. So I kept my voice calm. "Is that true?" Marlene's lip trembled. That told me more than words. I felt something inside me shift, something old and hard. Thomas used to say silence reveals more than shouting ever will. He had told our boys that too. Listen first, then act. Never move blind in a family war. "Marlene," I said, and my own voice sounded strange to me, too even, too controlled. "Whose child is that?" She covered her face and began to cry, not loud, not messy, just deep, tired crying, like it had been waiting weeks for permission. I let her cry. I let the truth press down on both of us until she could no longer hide under it. At last she whispered, "I never wanted this." That was not my question. Her shoulders shook. "I know." I leaned forward. "Then answer me." She lowered her hands. Her mascara had run down her cheeks, and there was something close to shame in her eyes, but also terror. Real terror. "I was going to tell Daniel," she said. "I swear I was. But then Claire found out, and she said if I said one word, she'd tell everyone her version first. She said she would destroy me before I ever opened my mouth." My heart started beating harder. How did Claire find out? Marlene swallowed, because she was there. I frowned. There where? Marlene stared at me as if she was begging me not to make her say it. But I had buried a husband, raised 2 stubborn sons, and survived enough betrayal to know that mercy without truth is just another lie. "Answer me," I said. She looked at the photo of Daniel and Michael on the mantel, then back at me. And in a voice so small it barely sounded human, she said, "The baby might be Michael's." For a moment, I could not breathe. Not because I did not understand. Because I understood too well. My son's wife sat in my living room, half broken, telling me my younger son may have fathered the child my older son had been loving as his own. I rose from my chair slowly, every joint in my body stiff with rage. Marlene looked up at me in panic. "Evelyn, please don't call them yet." But I was already reaching for the phone on the side table. My fingers closed around it, and I looked straight at her. "You should have come sooner," I said. Then I dialed my brother James, the only man left alive who remembered exactly what my husband taught us about betrayal inside a family. When he answered, I did not bother with hello. I said, "It's time, do what Daddy taught us." And from behind me, Marlene let out a sound that told me the worst part of the night had not even begun. James arrived without sirens, without questions, and without wasting a minute. That was how my brother had always been. Quiet feet, sharp eyes, a man who understood that some storms did not need noise, they needed control. By the time I opened the door for him, the night had deepened, and the cold had settled in around the porch light. He stepped inside, took one look at my face, then looked past me at Marlene on the couch. He did not speak right away. Neither did I. James removed his cap slowly and held it in both hands. His hair had gone mostly silver these last few years, and grief had carved lines into his face that never used to be there. But he still had the same presence he had when we were young, the kind that made people straighten up without knowing why. Finally, he asked, "How bad is it?" I shut the door behind him. "Bad enough." His eyes moved to Marlene again. She said it. She said enough. Marlene looked like she wanted the floor to open and take her with it. Her shoulders were hunched, and both her hands were wrapped around a mug of tea she had barely touched. I had made it for her more out of habit than kindness. In my house, even bad news came with tea. That was how my mother had done it, and her mother before her. James walked into the living room and sat in the armchair opposite her. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Tell it clean," he said. "No drifting, no crying around the point, just truth." Marlene blinked at him, hurt flickering across her face. "I have been crying because my whole life is falling apart." James gave one slow nod. "And if what my sister told me is true, you helped set the fire, so now I need facts." I sat beside the lamp and folded my hands in my lap. The room felt smaller with the 3 of us in it, thick with old family rules and new shame. Marlene stared at the tea for a long moment, then let out a shaky breath. "It started 4 months ago," she said. James did not move. "With who?" She swallowed. "Michael." Even hearing my younger son's name out loud in that sentence made my chest tighten. Marlene rushed on before either of us could cut in. "It was one night, just one. Daniel and I had been fighting for weeks. He was barely home. He was angry all the time, and I know that doesn't excuse anything, I know it, but I felt invisible. Claire and Michael came over for dinner. Claire left early because she said she had a headache. Daniel got called into work. Michael stayed behind on the porch with me after everyone else was gone." I closed my eyes for a second. I could picture that porch, the old swing, the yellow light, the easy way people talked when they thought family made everything safe. "What happened?" James asked. Marlene stared at the floor. "We talked about Daniel, About Claire. About how lonely marriage can feel even when there's a ring on your hand. We had both been drinking some, not enough to forget what we were doing, just enough to stop caring for one stupid hour. My voice came out low. You slept with your husband's brother. Her face crumpled. Yes. The truth sat between us, ugly and plain. James asked, did Michael know there could be a baby? She nodded once. I told him 2 weeks later when I missed my cycle. He said it was probably Daniel, and we should keep quiet unless there was a reason not to. That sounded like Michael, smart in the cheap way, calm when calm protected him. I looked at her sharply. And Claire, how did Claire know? Marlene gripped the mug tighter, because she never had a headache that night. A cold feeling moved down my spine. She came back, Marlene said. She forgot her purse, or maybe she only pretended to. I don't know anymore. But she came back and she saw us through the side window. She never said anything that night. Not to me, not to Michael. She just waited. James leaned back slowly. Waited for what? For power, Marlene whispered. That's what Claire loves most. Not money, not love, control. I could not argue with that. Claire had always smiled too quickly whenever someone else was uncomfortable. I had noticed it years ago and told myself not to be petty. I should have listened to my own spirit. Marlene wiped at her face. A few weeks later, she came to my house while Daniel was at work. She sat in my kitchen like she owned it and said she knew. Then she told me she had been looking for a way to get rid of Daniel for years. James frowned. Get rid of Daniel from what? From Daddy's land, I said softly. He looked at me, then nodded. He understood. My late husband had left behind more than memories. There was the family house, some savings, and 40 acres of land outside town that had tripled in value after the highway project. Daniel had managed most of it since Thomas died, but ownership had not been fully transferred. Everything was still tied up in the family trust, waiting on my final signature. Claire had asked questions about that land more times than I could count. Marlene nodded through tears. She said if Daniel raised a child that wasn't his, and the truth came out later, it would break him. She said he'd unravel, and once he did, Michael could step in as the stable son, the dependable one. She said people trust the brother who looks calm. I felt sick. James asked, and Michael knew she was planning this. I don't know everything he knew, Marlene said. At first I thought he was scared like I was. Then little things started making sense. The way he kept telling me to be patient. The way Claire kept reminding me that DNA tests ruin families. The way both of them watched Daniel carry that baby like she was his whole world. My throat burned. Daniel loved that little girl more than he loved sleep, more than pride, more than himself. Marlene looked up at me then, truly looked at me, and I saw something raw in her face. Tonight Claire came over. She said the baby is getting older and starting to look too much like Michael. She said if I didn't tell Daniel soon, she would. But she said she'd do it in front of everyone at your birthday dinner next week. My hands went cold. She wanted to humiliate him, I said. Marlene nodded. And me. She said some people only learn through public pain. James stood up. I knew that look on my brother's face. He had reached the end of listening and the beginning of action. What are you doing? Marlene asked, panic rising in her voice. He turned to me. We don't wait for next week. No, I said, standing too. We don't. Then my phone lit up on the side table. Daniel. My older son. Calling at midnight. And when I answered, I heard his voice break before he even said hello. He said, Mama, where's Marlene? And why is Michael here saying the baby isn't mine? For 1 second, the whole room stopped breathing. I held the phone so tight my hand started to ache. James turned toward me. Marlene stood up so fast the tea nearly spilled from the table. Nobody spoke, but I could hear Daniel breathing hard on the other end, the sound of a man trying not to come apart before he had all the facts. Daniel, I said carefully, where are you? At home, his voice cracked. Michael just showed up out of nowhere. Claire's in the car. He came into my house like he had a right to be there, and he said we need to talk about the baby. He paused, and I heard something hit the wall in the background. Mama, tell me where my wife is. Marlene put her hand over her mouth. I looked at her once, then back at James. Daniel, I said, stay where you are. Do not leave that house. Do not touch your brother. I'm coming. There was a long silence. Then he asked the question I had been praying not to hear yet. Is it true? I shut my eyes. No mother is prepared for the moment. One son becomes the wound of another. Before I could answer, Marlene crossed the room in 2 steps and reached for the phone with shaking fingers. Please, she whispered, let me talk to him. I stared at her for a second, then handed it over. She pressed the phone to her ear with both hands. Daniel. His voice came back sharp and broken. Where are you? At your mother. Why? She started crying again, but this time there was no hiding behind it. Because I was a coward. Because Claire said she was going to tell you in a way that would destroy you, and I could not let that happen. Daniel did not answer. Marlene drew in a breath so shaky I thought she might choke on it. I should have told you months ago. I know that. I know it every single day. I tried to pretend the truth would go away if I loved you enough after it happened. I tried to act normal and be a good wife and a good mother and just live inside the lie, but I couldn't. I can't. Still no answer. The silence coming from the phone was worse than yelling. Then Daniel said, very low, was it Michael? Marlene looked at me, then James, then down at the floor. Yes. James turned his face away. I held onto the back of my chair because my knees suddenly felt weak. On the phone, Daniel made a sound I will never forget. It was not crying. It was not anger. It was the sound a person makes when something inside them tears all at once. How long? He asked. 4 months, she whispered. Did Claire know? Yes. And Michael knew there was a chance. Yes. He laughed then, but it sounded empty. So everybody got a vote in my life except me. No, Marlene said quickly. No, that's not true. I never wanted this to keep going. I was scared. You were scared, he repeated. Marlene, I kissed that little girl goodnight every night believing I was her father. His voice broke on the last word. Marlene sank slowly onto the couch, crying into the phone. I know, and I hate myself for it. Daniel went quiet again. Then I heard another voice in the background. Michael. I could not make out every word, but I heard enough. He was saying, you need to calm down. We can sort this out like adults. Like adults. My brother James actually laughed under his breath when he heard that. Daniel came back on the line, but now his voice had changed. It had gone flat. That frightened me more than rage would have. Put Mama back on. Marlene handed me the phone like it was burning her. Daniel. You need to come now, he said, and bring Uncle James. I glanced at my brother. We're already leaving. Good, Daniel said, because if you don't get here fast, I don't know what I'm going to do. The line went dead. For a moment, nobody moved. Then James grabbed his keys from the table. We take my truck. Marlene stood up again, wiping her face with both hands. I'm coming. I looked at her. You are because this ends tonight, no more hiding. She nodded. The drive to Daniel's house felt longer than it was. James drove. I sat in the front. Marlene sat in the back seat, silent except for the soft hitch in her breathing every now and then. The roads were nearly empty, and every streetlight we passed flashed across the windshield like a warning. I kept thinking about my husband. Thomas believed family could survive almost anything except secret betrayal. He used to tell our boys, if you make a mistake, confess it early. A wound cleaned early can still heal. Leave it covered, and rot will do the rest. Tonight, rot had reached the bone. When we pulled into Daniel's driveway, every light in the house was on. Claire's car sat behind Michael's truck, parked crooked like she had arrived in a hurry. The front door was open. Before we even stepped out, we could hear shouting from inside. James got out first. Stay close, he told me. I did not answer. I was already moving. We walked into the house. and found all three of them in the living room. Daniel stood near the fireplace, pale and shaking, one hand braced on the mantel. Michael was across from him, trying to look calm and failing. Claire stood off to the side with her arms folded, like she was attending a show she had paid to see. And in the middle of the room, in the baby swing by the couch, little Emma was asleep. That sight nearly broke me. All this poison, all this selfishness, all this damage, and the child at the center of it was sleeping in a pink blanket under a little stuffed rabbit, knowing nothing. Daniel looked at Marlene when she entered, and whatever was left in his face fell away. Michael took one step forward. "Daniel, listen, this got out of hand, but we can still handle it privately." James moved, so fast even I did not expect it. He stepped between them and pointed straight at Michael's chest. "You do not get to use the word privately after sleeping with your brother's wife and helping hide a baby's paternity." The room went dead silent. Then Claire smiled. Not wide, not kindly. Just enough for me to see it. And in that moment, I knew something worse was still waiting. Because a woman does not smile in the middle of a family collapse unless the collapse was part of her plan. Then Claire looked right at me and said, "Since everybody's finally being honest, maybe we should tell Daniel what his father was really planning before he died." Nobody moved. The silence after Claire said that was so sharp it felt like something had shattered in the room. Even Daniel stopped breathing for a second. Michael looked at her with sudden alarm, like he had not expected her to go that far. That told me two things at once. First, Claire had been holding more than one weapon. Second, she had just decided to use one nobody else had approved. I stared at her. "Be very careful." But Claire did not look careful. She looked pleased. Daniel turned slowly toward me. His face was white, his eyes hollow. "What is she talking about?" I could feel James beside me stiffen. Marlene stood near the doorway with both arms wrapped around herself, crying silently now, too drained for sound. And in the middle of all of us, little Emma slept on, her tiny chest rising and falling like there was still peace left somewhere in this world. Claire tilted her head. "You didn't tell him." "Tell me what?" Daniel snapped. I took one slow breath, trying to steady the pounding in my chest. "Claire is twisting old business." But she cut in before I could say more. "Old business," she said with a laugh. "That's one way to put it, or we could call it what it was, Evelyn. Your husband planned to cut Daniel out." Daniel's eyes locked on mine so hard I felt it. "That's a lie," I said. Claire lifted one shoulder. "Is it? Then why did Thomas meet with Mr. Henderson 3 weeks before he died? Why did he change the trust paperwork? Why did he write notes about responsibility, bloodlines, and family stability?" Michael turned toward her sharply. "Claire." She ignored him. James stepped forward. "You need to stop talking before you say something you cannot take back." But Daniel was already spiraling toward the wrong thought. I could see it happening in his face. Too much pain had opened him, and now every word had a straight path in. He looked at me and asked, "Did Daddy plan to replace me with Michael?" That question hit harder than anything else that night. Because it did not come from anger. It came from an old wound. Daniel had always loved his father deeply, but he had also spent half his life trying to prove he was enough for him. Thomas was a good man, but he was not always a soft one. He believed in earning your place, in carrying your weight, in being strong before anyone asked you to be. Daniel, being the oldest, got the hardest version of that. Michael got charm and excuses. Daniel got standards. So when Claire said those words, she was not throwing random poison. She was aiming at the crack she knew already existed. I walked toward my son slowly. "Look at me." He did. "Your father did not plan to replace you." Claire laughed again. "Then tell him why the paperwork changed." I turned on her so fast my voice came out sharper than I intended. "Because my husband was dying, and he was trying to protect his family from people exactly like you." That wiped the smile off her face for half a second. Daniel frowned. "What paperwork?" James answered before I could. "Your father added conditions, Daniel. That is all. He did not cut you out." Claire folded her arms tighter. "Convenient." James looked at her with the kind of stillness that scares sensible people. You want the truth? Fine. Thomas came to me because he no longer trusted Michael's judgment, and he had started questioning your influence over this family. Michael took a step back. That's not true. It is true, James said. He told me you were getting too comfortable talking about what belonged to who before the man was even in the ground. Michael's mouth opened, then closed. I could remember that conversation now as clearly as if it were happening again. Thomas had been weaker by then, sitting at the kitchen table with a blanket over his legs and legal papers spread out in front of him. He told me he wanted Daniel to remain lead trustee, but he wanted stronger protections around the land until both boys showed they could handle family without greed. He said Michael was too easily led, and Claire was too interested in outcomes that benefited Claire. At the time, I thought he was being overly cautious. Now I wished he had been even more ruthless. Daniel spoke quietly. So what changed? I answered him this time. Your father added a condition that the land could not be divided or sold unless both brothers remained in good standing with the family trust, and unless I approved it. He wanted time. He wanted proof. He wanted to make sure no one married into this family and started steering it for money. Claire's face hardened. That land should have been settled years ago. There it is, James said. Daniel looked from me to Michael. Did you know this? Michael hesitated. That hesitation told its own story. I knew some of it, he said finally. Not everything. James barked out a bitter laugh. You knew enough. Claire stepped forward now, done pretending. Yes, he knew enough. We both did. We knew Daniel being in charge of that trust forever made no sense. He acts like the family saint, but everybody bends around him. Everybody protects his feelings. Everything always becomes about Daniel. Daniel stared at her like he had never seen her before. My feelings. Yes, Claire snapped. Your feelings, your image, your role as the good son. Do you know how exhausting that is? Michael gets treated like a mistake. I get treated like an outsider. Your mother smiles at me, but she never trusted me. Your father made sure of that. I looked at her. You earned that yourself. Her eyes flashed. No, Evelyn, I saw this family for what it was. A house built on rules that only protected certain people. Marlene finally found her voice. So you decided to ruin everybody. Claire turned toward her with pure contempt. You ruined yourself. I just refused to waste the opportunity. That landed like a slap. Daniel looked at Michael again, and this time there was no confusion left in him. Only horror. Did you sleep with my wife because you wanted her, or because Claire told you it could break me? Michael's whole body tightened. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Daniel shouted. Help me understand how my own brother ends up in my house at midnight telling me my baby might be his. Emma stirred in the swing at the sound of his voice. A soft cry started to rise. I moved to the baby first. Some instincts remain no matter how broken the room is. I lifted her carefully, held her against my shoulder, and patted her back until she settled again. Her small hand curled against my blouse. I could have wept. Behind me, Michael finally answered. It started as one mistake, he said. That part is true, but after Claire found out, nothing felt simple anymore. She kept saying the truth could be used, that if Daniel lost his footing, things would change, that maybe for once I wouldn't have to stand behind him. Daniel gave a slow, disbelieving shake of his head. So that's what this was, not lust, not love, envy. Michael's voice cracked. You don't know what it's like always being second. No, Daniel said. I only know what it's like to love you anyway. That silenced everybody. Even Claire. Because there it was, plain and awful. The thing Michael had traded away, not land, not status, not a future payout. His brother's love. Marlene sank into a chair and covered her face again. I told myself I was trapped, but I made choices too. I let fear keep me quiet. I let them decide the pace of my confession. I let Daniel keep living a lie because I was ashamed. I shifted Emma gently on my shoulder and looked at her. Then say all of it now, no more half-truth. Marlene lowered her hands. Her face was swollen and red. but her voice was clearer than it had been all night. I knew there was a real chance the baby was Michael's. I knew Daniel deserved the truth long before tonight. I stayed silent because I was terrified he would hate me, and because Claire kept threatening to tell it in the cruelest way possible. Then after Emma was born, Daniel loved her so purely that I told myself maybe blood didn't matter, maybe I could bury the lie forever. But every time he held her, it got worse. Every time he called us his girls, I felt sick. Tonight Claire came to my house and said next week at your birthday dinner, she would expose me in front of everyone, then push for Daniel to be removed from anything tied to the trust because he would be too unstable to manage it. That's when I came here. Daniel's face folded in on itself. He sat down hard on the edge of the couch, like his legs could not hold him anymore. Then he looked up at me, at Emma in my arms, and then at Michael. And in a voice so quiet it barely carried, he said, "Tell me one thing true before this night ends. Did either of you ever plan to let me live my life in peace, or was I always just the fool standing in the way?" Michael opened his mouth. Claire reached for his arm. And that was when James pulled an envelope from inside his coat and dropped it on the coffee table. The sound made everyone jump. I stared at it, already knowing what it was before he said a word. James looked at Michael and Claire, then at Daniel. "Your father gave me copies," he said, "and there's one page in there neither of them ever knew existed." Claire's face changed. For the first time all night, she looked afraid. Nobody reached for the envelope. The room had gone so still again that I could hear Emma's breathing against my shoulder. James stood near the coffee table with his hand resting at his side, calm as ever, but I knew that look. He had waited years to open that paper only if he absolutely had to. And tonight, he had decided we were there. Claire stared at it first, then at James, then at me. "What page?" she asked, and her voice had lost all that smug shine. James did not answer her. He looked at Daniel. "Sit steady," he said. "You need a clear head for this." Daniel was already sitting, elbows on his knees, hands hanging loose between them, like he had been emptied out. He looked up slowly, and I saw it on his face, the pain, yes, but also something else. He had reached a point where the truth could not hurt worse than the guessing. "Read it," he said. James picked up the envelope, opened it carefully, and pulled out a folded paper worn soft at the edges. He looked at it once, then handed it to me. "You read better than I do when I'm mad," he said. I took the page with Emma, still tucked against me, and started reading. It was Thomas's handwriting. Strong, straight, unmistakable. "If anything happens to me before the trust is fully settled, Daniel is to remain lead trustee unless he willingly steps away. Michael is not to be excluded from family support, but he is not to be placed in control of any land sale, transfer, or division while under the influence of outside pressure, poor judgment, or divided loyalty. If at any point either son betrays the other in a way that threatens the family's moral foundation, their claim to decision-making authority is suspended until Evelyn determines otherwise. Family is not held together by blood alone, but by truth, loyalty, and conduct. If betrayal enters the house, protect the innocent first." My voice shook on the last line. Protect the innocent first. I lowered the page and looked at Daniel. His eyes had filled, but he did not cry. He just sat there breathing through the wreckage of everything he had believed. Then he looked at Michael. "So Daddy saw you clearly after all." Michael's face had gone pale. That was years ago. He didn't know what things would become. "No," James said. "He knew exactly what weakness looks like when it starts." Claire stepped forward then, angry again because fear had failed her. "That paper changes nothing. Daniel still built his whole life on a lie. That baby still may not be his." I turned to her so sharply Emma stirred again. "That baby," I said, "is an innocent child. Watch your mouth." Claire laughed bitterly. "You think that old man's note saves him? The marriage is over. The trust is poisoned. The family is done." "No," Daniel said quietly. Everybody looked at him. He stood up slowly. His face was different now. Not healed, Not even close, but clear. That dangerous kind of clear that only comes after the worst has already happened. "The family isn't done," he said, "but my part in pretending is." He turned to Marlene first. She looked up at him like she already knew what was coming. "I loved you honestly," he said. "I need you to remember that for the rest of your life because it is the part that should hurt the most. I loved you honestly while you let me live a lie." Marlene broke then, truly broke. She slid off the chair onto her knees, crying hard, not caring who saw. I know, I don't deserve forgiveness." "No," Daniel said, "you don't." That landed hard because it was not cruel. It was simply true. Then he looked at Michael. I had seen my sons fight as boys, broken bicycles, wrestling in the yard, a black eye once over a fishing knife. But I had never seen Daniel look at his brother the way he looked at him then. Not with hate. Hate would have meant there was still heat left. This was colder. "You were my little brother," Daniel said. "Do you understand that? Before you were anything else, you were my little brother. When Daddy was too hard on you, I stood between you both. When you wrecked your truck, I lied and said I was driving. When you needed money, I sent it. When Claire mocked you, I defended you to her and for her. And the whole time, you were standing inside my life with a knife in your hand." Michael's eyes filled. "Daniel, I swear, I never meant for it to go this far." Daniel gave one hollow laugh. "Men say that after the floor collapses, never before." Michael tried to step toward him, but James moved slightly, and that was enough to stop him. Then Daniel looked at Claire. "You," he said, "are never walking into my house again." She folded her arms. "You don't own everything." "No," he said, "but I own enough, and after tonight you will not get 1 inch more through me." She opened her mouth, but I spoke first. "Nor through me." She turned to me. I shifted Emma gently and held Thomas's page in my other hand. "Your husband's claim to any decision-making in this family is suspended. Starting tonight, the trust remains locked. No land sale, no transfer, no division, no access. I will have the attorney draw the formal action in the morning." Michael stared at me. "Mama." "No," I said. "Don't call me that while she's standing next to you and your sin is still warm in this room." He flinched. Claire went cold. "You can't just strip him over family drama." "This is not family drama," James said. "This is fraud of the heart, attempted manipulation of inheritance, and a deliberate plot to publicly destroy a man for leverage." Daniel nodded once, "And I'm done protecting either of them." He pulled out his phone. Michael looked alarmed. "Who are you calling?" "My lawyer first," Daniel said. "Then a lab in the morning." Marlene shut her eyes. He looked at her without softness now. "There will be a DNA test, public enough for the truth, private enough to protect Emma." Claire scoffed. "There it is, the noble act." Daniel turned on her with a force that made even James pause. "No," he said. "You don't get to mock decency after building your whole plan on poison." Claire's face tightened, but for once she had no clever line ready. Marlene rose slowly from the floor, wiping her face. "Daniel." He did not answer. "I will sign whatever you need. I will tell the truth to anyone involved. I will not fight you. I will not lie again." She swallowed hard. "And if Emma is Michael's, I will never ask you to pretend otherwise." That was the first fully honest thing she had said all night. Daniel nodded once, but it was a dead kind of nod. "You should have had that courage before." Then Emma woke properly and began to cry. That cry cut through every adult failure in the room. I held her closer and rocked her gently. She was hungry or scared or maybe just feeling the tension that children always seem to feel before they have words for it. Daniel looked at her and broke at last. Tears filled his eyes and spilled down before he could stop them. He came toward me slowly and touched her tiny foot under the blanket. "I loved her from the minute I saw her," he whispered. I put my hand over his. "That love is still real." He nodded, crying now without shame. "I know, that's what makes this so ugly." James looked away to give him that privacy. Even Marlene bowed her head. Michael stood frozen, staring at the child like he was only now realizing a baby is not a theory, not leverage, not a bargaining chip, but a life. Daniel straightened after a moment. Then he did the thing that ended everything. He looked at Michael and said, "You will leave with your wife. Tonight. You will not contact me again except through legal channels until I say otherwise. If the child is yours, that truth will be established properly and responsibility will follow. But brotherhood is over. You buried that yourself." Michael looked like he had been punched. "Daniel, please." "No." It was a simple word, but it had final weight in it. Claire reached for Michael's sleeve. "Come on." He did not move at first. Then James stepped closer and said, "Son, before pride makes this worse, leave." Michael looked at me one last time, like maybe I would soften. I did not. He and Claire walked out without another word. The front door closed behind them, and the whole house seemed to sag with relief. Nobody spoke for a while. Then Marlene said, very small, "What happens to me now?" Daniel did not even look at her. "You tell the truth," he said. "Every version of it, to the lawyers, to the court if needed, to yourself. Then you live with what it cost." She nodded through fresh tears. "And Emma?" she asked. That one took him longer. Finally he said, "Emma will be protected. No matter whose blood she carries, she did not ask for this." I nearly wept with pride right there. Even wounded, my son still knew where innocence stood. Morning came gray and tired. James stayed until dawn. Marlene slept for 1 hour in the guest room because she was too weak to drive, then left with red eyes and no makeup and no performance left in her. Daniel stayed in the nursery chair holding Emma until the sun rose. The DNA results took 8 days. Michael was the father. That part hurt, but it did not surprise anyone by then. What came next was not loud revenge. It was better. It was clean. Daniel filed for divorce. He stepped back from daily care of Emma, but he established in writing that until custody and paternity were fully settled, the child's safety came first and no games would be played around her routine. That made the judge look favorably on him later. Marlene, to her credit, told the truth in full. No edits, no excuses. The court moved faster because of it. I froze the trust completely until the attorney updated every condition. Michael lost any role in managing family property. Not temporary, not symbolic, permanently. Thomas's note gave me the authority, but Michael's choices gave me the reason. Claire tried to argue, threatened to challenge, even hinted she had people who would force a settlement. James smiled when he heard that and said, "Let her try." She did. And she lost. Because schemes sound strong in kitchens and cars and whispered calls. They look much weaker in offices with documents and signatures. Michael left her 9 months later. Not because he became noble overnight, but because once there was no trust money to angle toward and no brother left to compete with, the marriage had nothing warm inside it. He sent me one letter after that, not asking for money, not even asking for forgiveness, just one page saying he finally understood what envy had cost him. I put it in a drawer. I have not answered yet. Marlene moved to another town with Emma and took a job at a dental office. We speak sometimes. Not like family used to speak, but like two people who survived the same fire from different sides. She never asked Daniel for another chance. That was the first wise thing she did after the truth came out. And Daniel did not heal fast. People think betrayal has a big ending, then life returns. That is not true. It leaks into little things. A chair at dinner, a holiday name card, a joke you cannot make anymore. It took him a long time to laugh without forcing it. But he did heal. Not because he forgot. Because he stopped protecting the lie after it was exposed. A year later, he took me to see the land. We stood under the tall oak at the edge of the property, where Thomas used to stand with the boys when they were small. Daniel looked out over the field and said, "I used to think revenge meant making them hurt the way I hurt." I looked at him, and now. He smiled, tired but real. Now I think revenge was telling the truth before they could shape it, protecting the innocent, and refusing to let rotten people inherit clean things. That sounded so much like his father, I had to look away for a second. I slipped my arm through his and said, "That sounds like something Daddy taught us." He laughed softly. Maybe Uncle James was right to come that night. He was. We stood there, a little longer in the wind. The truth had cost us plenty. One son, one marriage, the old easy version of family. But silence would have cost more. That is the lesson I carry now. Confession hurts, but hidden betrayal rots everything around it. Silence can feel merciful for a while, but it is often just fear in nicer clothing. Truth, even late, gives people a chance to stand where they really belong. And revenge, when it is righteous, does not always scream. Sometimes it signs papers, closes doors, protects children, and leaves liars with nothing but each other. Before I end this, let me say one small thing. If stories like this move you, take a second to like, comment, and subscribe. Somebody out there may need the reminder that truth told late is still better than a lie fed daily. As for my family, we are smaller now. Quieter too. But we are honest. And at my age, I have learned that an honest house, even a wounded one, is worth more than a crowded house built on secrets.